Good work. No. Good morning. Yes. Fantastic. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Hank, for making the time. It's good to see you again. Welcome to AIThrivio podcast calls, where we're exploring everything AI challenges, present, future, responsible transition within staffing and recruiting. I'm so glad to have you as a guest. We had a pre-podcast call on Monday, and I think your insights are just what my audience needs. So we're just going to run through the bank of questions that I shared with you. And I think a good place to start, which is what you always advise everyone to ask you, is why you've chosen to call your company Be Additive. So if you want to give a brief intro into how Be Additive came to be, what you've done to date, just tell us about, Be Additive really, and then we can kick off from there.
All right. Well, first, thank you for having me on your podcast, Ivy. So we'll start with our name because it is a bit of an odd name. Uh, I'm a serial entrepreneur. As you can see, I'm not a 20-something. And so I've started lots of companies. And for me, entrepreneurship has really never been about making money. It's always been about leaving the world a little bit better place and transforming a lot of lives. And so this is kind of my last chapter in entrepreneurship. And I decided to name the company Be Additive and create a statement of purpose around that name that actually reflects my values, but hopefully reflects the value of my company because everyone who started a company with me has worked with me for about 10 years. So Be Additive just means adding value to the world, leaving the world a better place than you found it. And there's really three pillars of that. First is just being kind to people, pretty simple. But what we're really interested is adding value at scale. So the next one is talks about how you can be impactful. And entrepreneurship is one of the very best ways you can be impactful because you can touch so many lives through building a big company, not just your clients and your but also all of your employees and really society at large. And then the last one's a little bit different. It's about being courageous because there's a lot of unethical people in the world, a lot of unethical people in business. And if you let them just get away with being unethical, they do it again. And so, my belief is when you encounter uh, someone who's unethical, you resist it, even if it costs you dearly, because that's how you make the world better. All right. As for Be Additive itself, we are a company that's into recruiting. I think recruiting is one of the greatest ways you can add value to the world because when you get somebody a job, not only do you allow them to provide for themselves and their family, but uh, you really change their outlook on the world. People who are employed, they're confident, they uh, have the resources to do good things, and so there's really nothing you can do that helps the world more than getting people jobs. At Be Additive, we're a family of companies. So we do have a conventional staffing firm. We
Okay.
also have what we call a KPO, which stands for Knowledge Process Outsourcing. And that
Okay.
company has subsidiaries in India and the Philippines. And what we do is we build teams of workers for companies in the US and Europe. It could be a team of people in marketing, could be software developers, could be back office, could be a team of recruiters. But we build those teams in India and the Philippines. And through relationships with employers of records, we can work in 41 other countries to build teams. But the really fun one is the one I'm heading, and we are building an AI talent marketplace. And the problem we're solving is that there's a huge shortage of senior AI talent. So not so much at the low end, entry-level programmers, there's no shortage of them at all.
Mm.
But you're talking about people who really have the technological know-how, ability to build products, ability to work with people, the network, those sort of people are in incredibly short supply. And startups have a very hard time hiring them. Even funded startups have a very hard time hiring them because there's so few of them, and their salary demands are incredible. Usually in the U.S. they're looking for a salary of $300,000 to $500,000 annually, plus a big chunk of equity.
Mm,
And when you offer that to them, they often don't take your offer because they want to work for NVIDIA or Google or OpenAI or
mm,
Anthropic.
mm,
And so it's just very hard for these funded startups because they raise a lot of money and
mm,
investors are pushing on them, build, 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 get a product out, get a product out.
mm,
This is so competitive, this market, you have to build right away. So in our marketplace, those are our clients, the funded AI startups. They post job orders on our marketplace. And then I've been working in global recruiting for the last 20 years. So we know that there's great AI talent available, not just in the US, not just in Europe, but
mm,
really all over the world. People with PhDs, usually working in domestic companies.
mm,
So, for instance, if you're working domestically in India, your career is a little bit more limited than it would be if you were working in the US. You
mm,
don't really have the global exposure. So those people are eager to work for a Silicon Valley startup. First, they can get a 30-40% pay bump. But what it really gives them is access to the latest technology, access to the latest um, companies that can really build their resume and give them a path toward just global exposure. So, we use a lot of AI, match them in our marketplace. We have very experienced recruiters, also supporting them. So it's very white glove treatment, combination of tech and people.
okay. That's really good. And from what you've said, two questions are coming up for me. One of them is, do you solely rely on the tech side of things? So the more senior AI professionals, are they all totally tech, or do you also recruit for positions like fractional chief AI officers? Because a lot of companies now, it's not just the tech side that's important. They need that dual-hatted individual that can also speak to the business and carry the business along with this transition. So somebody who can talk at board level, talk to founders, CEOs, C-suite level, to just let them know what the benefits of AI can be and how to responsibly adopt that into the organization. So are you totally focused on the tech side, or do you also recruit for positions on the dual side, the business side slash tech?
All right, that's a great question. So in the AI talent marketplace, we're focusing on all senior AI positions.
Okay.
So, and we have a very, very specific target market. It's funded AI startups. Now, the reason we're doing that is because as a new company,
Mm,
we can't be everything to everyone. And so we're trying to create a beachhead in the recognition amongst funded AI startups that for senior AI talent, we're the place to go. However, our other business units in our company can fill any sort of position. So even entry-level positions. So if you were one of our clients on AI Talent Marketplace and you told me that you also need to hire nurses, right? Something that has nothing to do with what we're doing,
okay.
we would send you to another division and you wouldn't
Okay.
be in the marketplace, but we have other people who can work on that.
Okay. Fantastic. That clarifies that for me. And then in terms of the more technical people, are you finding that, I mean, this is what I'm hearing, just having, a series of guests on the program. They're saying that AI is doing or can do a lot of the coding that we would have done back in the day, right? So a non-techie person, a software developer or whatever can actually get to grips with AI and produce an app just by giving a prompt to, some AI tool. Are you finding that the potential candidates that I mean, are they all that entrenched in coding and all the tech that goes behind the roles that you're trying to fill or not?
All right. So what you said about AI being great at coding, it's it's astonishing. Uh, and so before I moved into recruiting 20 years ago, I was involved with a bunch of venture capital-backed software companies. And if you look at our AI talent marketplace, we are building this with a team of 4 people. Four
Wow.
people. If I did this 5 years ago, it would have been 20 people. And not only do we do it with 4 people, they code, uh, it develops the code faster and better. So I'm very involved in this. So I realize all this is happening, but it still makes my jaw drop. But I watch our developers, and they just give spoken prompts to their computer, and then on their other monitor, you see code being poured out. And I'll give you an example. We're about to release our product. It's actually been released to a select few clients already, but in 2 weeks we're going to release it more broadly to roll out our beta. And so I was looking at it, and I noticed that it was a little bit inconsistent in capitalization. Right, not a big problem, but we want it to be perfect, right? So there's just inconsistencies in how we were doing capitalization. So I told our head of product this, and he took this like a 16-page style guide for SaaS products, and he uploaded it into Cursor and using Claude. In 20 minutes, all the capitalization was throughout our whole website. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch.
Mm.
So yes, and the reason I'm sure we've all seen used generative AI, right? Chat GPT and Claude
Yep.
and Gemini. Um, so we know that you can give generative AI prompts, and it can produce things in English, French, Spanish, any language you want to talk to it in. And so it's good at generating language. However, it's 10 times better at generating code because code is just a language, but it's much more structured with more roles than
Mm.
English or Spanish or French.
Mm. Mm.
So it can write it way, way better.
Mm.
And the really incredible thing that's happening is it used to take the foundational AI companies, 6, 9 months to do another release of their product. Now the most current versions of their product are also being written by AI.
Mm.
So they're coming out every month.
Mm.
And it's just happening so fast. These products are getting better and better and better. So it's amazing to watch. I don't know if you saw the announcement yesterday from Anthropic on their Mythos preview product. It's a
No,
product.
I think I missed that one.
All right, well, it just happened yesterday. But but and other stuff, it happens every day.
So
There's
this is
enough.
it. Stuff is moving
But
so quickly.
but listen to this one. So this is a product that is so good at finding software vulnerabilities
Mm.
that Anthropic refused to release it because what it
Whoa.
needs is some teenage kid can get a hold of this and find vulnerabilities and like how the software for a power plant works or the water system, and they can hack it.
Hack into
So
it.
they released it to 40 large companies that they consider very responsible. They're probably not going to release it generally for at least 18 months
Mm.
and try to get all the honest people to fix their products. But it has found bugs in every product.
Wow.
Some that have been out on the market for like 30 years and no one's ever
Wow.
found the bug. So it's,
Wow.
you know, it's incredible. But um, has enormous potential to do good things, enormous potential to do bad things.
Mm-hmm. 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 This is what I'm finding with every guest that I speak to. As quickly as technology is advancing and as better as everything's becoming, um, it's also raising serious concerns because the better we get at doing things, the more creative, unsavory characters are gonna get in finding those loopholes, right? And using advances in technology for, you know, not so good things, right? So maybe this will be a good point for me to go into. You mentioned something when we spoke on Monday, that you recruit globally and you have collaborations in 41 or 43 countries. And I think you've alluded to that again today. And you said you've got subsidiaries in Philippines and India that help you source. Two previous guests on the podcast have actually said that they've got serious impersonation challenges where people have profiles saying they can do this, that, and the other. Um, and that they would love AI to be able to fish out these fake profiles, if we want to call it that, right? Because there's a lot of impersonification going on.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure if it's region specific because these two guests happen to be recruiting from certain regions of the world, or if because the additive is on a global scale, are you finding that generally across every region that you operate in, or are there specific pockets? And if there are specific pockets, what is Be Additive doing to, you know, circumvent that?
Mm. All right, so that's a great question. So let me give you a little background before Be Additive. So before Be Additive, I was the founder and CEO of a pretty large recruiting company. We had about 950 recruiters,
Okay.
and we were working in about 30 countries. I started Be Additive with seven other people. They all came from me from my last company. They all have more than 10 years of experience working with me. So they're the best of the 950. And
Love it.
and uh, And when you work in all these countries, you find exactly what you said, and especially with AI now, there's a lot of cheating going on in interviews. There's a lot of people who misrepresent themselves, who, maybe someone might interview who doesn't even take the job.
Mm,
Um, so there are tools that you can use to uncover some of that, but a lot of it is just experience. So we use a lot of AI in our company, but we also use a lot of people.
okay.
And and speaking, all right, so India is a great example. All right, there are fraudulent candidates in India. There's um, all the problems that you mentioned exist there. We've
Mm,
hired over 5,000 people in India. All right.
wow.
When you hire that many people, you learn all the BS, right? It looks like, you know, our radar's real keen.
Mm,
And so in addition to the tools, uh, we eliminate people all the time because we don't trust them.
mm,
You can just sniff it out and
mm,
this doesn't sound like it's right.
mm,
So that judgment's very important. Can AI do that? Not totally today. All
mm,
right. Um, but it is getting so smart so fast. And so I expect that it'll get better at that too in the next year.
mm. Okay. That's really an interesting question because I've always asked every podcast guest the split between traditional approaches when it comes to recruiting and staffing efforts and the more tech innovative methods. So with Be Additive, what would be the split? Because you just said that you use a lot of AI in your business, right? But that you also use people. So what would be the split? Because I think everyone agrees that right now, even though a few people, outliers, will say AI is the be all and end all and can do all things, and think AI can replace people even today. I don't think so. I think we're still a ways away from there. But in your business, in Be Additive, what's the percentage of the time that you rely solely on AI to do the work? And when do you feel that human intervention is required? Is it a 60-40 split? Is it a 50-50 split? Is it a 70-30 split? Because I think people need to understand that there's still the human intervention element that's required, regardless of how much AI we've got in our processes.
Okay, I got it. So um, let me just state very strongly that it's not one size fits all.
Okay.
All right, so it absolutely depends on the type of recruiting you're doing.
Okay.
We have an AI tools assessment team of 3 people.
Okay.
We are always assessing AI products. We always have 3 or 4 that we're looking at that are in trials. And um, so some things I've learned from that team is, first of all, it's coming so fast, and there are so many companies that misrepresent themselves and make claims that aren't valid. There's others that maybe understate what they can do. But I recommend products to our team all the time. Sometimes they'll come back to me and they'll say, Hank, this product's not ready. It
Mm,
has bugs. It's missing a major feature.
mm,
We ran these test case and the results weren't very good. We're not interested in it.
mm.
And then I keep hearing about it. And so 4 months later, I say, "Are you sure? This guy told me it's good, and he's a really smart guy. Look at it again." And they look at it again, and they go, "It's a totally different product. All the bugs are fixed. Uh, you know, not only are all the missing features there, there's new ones. We ran results; they're really good." So the first thing I tell people all the time is, it is changing so fast.
Mm.
You should never sign a long-term contract for any product.
That's it.
Because um, there's always new ones coming. Some of the new ones will be better.
Mhm,
Only when you start using these products do you truly understand what you need.
mhm,
And and so don't lock yourself in.
mhm.
But absolutely start using these products, because if you don't, all your competitors are, and they're going to put you out of business. So the question is, how deep can you go using AI tools? And it really depends very much on the type of recruiting you're doing. So if you're doing light industrial recruiting,
Mm,
where your recruiting interview is, can you lift 60 pounds? Are you authorized to work in the United States? And that's basically what you're asking. You don't have any need for a human being to ask those questions.
mm.
You can get a voice agent to ask all those questions for you. And I will tell you, your candidates will love that, because they can do an interview at 2 in the morning. And it's so much easier to coordinate. It's so much faster, and of course, it's much more efficient and less expensive. Now,
Yeah.
if you're hiring locum tenens, basically doctors, and you have an AI agent talk to them, they won't talk to you.
Oh, wow.
And so, it really depends on the type of recruiting you're doing, how much you can do, but there's certain things that you can do no matter what. Um, Parts of the recruiting process. AI does not replace jobs, it replaces tasks.
Yeah.
So you look at each job, and some tasks are very routine. They're very repetitive. AI can probably do them. Other tasks require a lot of judgment, human connection. AI isn't able to do them today. So things like sourcing candidates. Uh, there are great AI tools to source candidates. You should never have a recruiter, you know, going to each job board, put it in booleans strings like they used to do 5 or 6
Mm,
years ago. You can have a tool go out and source candidates. If you're in the right types of positions, they can communicate with the candidate, they can reach out to them, they can even do the interview all through AI. They'll do a screening interview.
yeah.
Same as, sourcing. You should also use it if you find a candidate, you go over their profile, put it into put it, into a generative AI tool, and ask it to prepare questions for you, and,
Exactly.
and ask it to explain the industry. And uh, our recruiters get so smart because they're using AI. Same with account managers. You should, as an account manager, you can not only source all the companies that you want using AI tools, but you can source the individual hiring managers, their background, learn everything about them, learn all about their industry, have a
Mhm.
prepare interview questions. So those aren't actually products. Some of those are products for sourcing the companies, but a lot of it is just using generative AI tools.
Mm,
So um, So I think in all recruiting organizations, you're going to see a good bit of AI. I think if you asked me 6 months ago, I would tell you that recruiting organizations were panicking and didn't know what to do. But now I find almost all of them have adopted this, or at least something. And and you are not going to eliminate recruiters, but you don't need to hire them as fast. Right. So
Mm,
someone asked me like 2 weeks ago, what would you do? We have a couple of really big clients. And so they have the potential to give us hundreds of jobs. They're that big if they
mm,
decided to turn on the faucet.
mm,
And they said, what are you going to do if they do that? And I said, I'm not worried at all.
mm,
Because first of all, we're only 2 years old as a company. We knew this was coming. So we developed all our processes from day one, integrating AI. So the AI parts of what we're doing, we can just scale it overnight. Now, there are the human parts of it. And I told you, I came from a company with 950 recruiters. They all want to work for us.
mm.
So I could add 100 recruiters in a month or two,
Wow.
just from people, not only I know, but people in our company know because we know so many recruiters.
Okay. So that's really impressive because I think a lot of recruiters and a lot of guests that I've had on the podcast are wanting to move from the more contingent hiring briefs from clients to retainerships purely because they want to use their expertise in the sector
Mhm.
to add, I think, greater value. They want to position themselves as a strategic partner to the organizations that they work with, right? So they don't just want to be called in when there's this particular position to be filled or when the company can't find somebody themselves and they pick up the phone and call XYZ recruiting company. They want to be there on a more long-term basis. And from what you're saying, you've got a couple of big clients that can pretty much give you up to 100, briefs to fill at any one time, or they can reduce that. Your company is 2 years old. You've built in AI from day one, so you can scale on the AI side really quickly. You also have a network of recruiters that you've worked with in the past that you can call on. So if you need the human element, like simply scaled overnight, you can do that. You're in a unique position where most recruiters don't have that leverage or the number of options that Be Additive looks like it has, right? So I guess my question will be right now on a proportion scale, what would be the split between retainers and contingency briefs or contingency type clients that Be Additive has? Or are you solely looking at retainerships just because of how Be Additive is set up?
Is retainership permanent hiring for permanent?
So permanent
Yeah.
hires, but yeah.
So we don't do much of that. I would say
Okay.
permanent hires maybe 5%.
Oh
Yeah,
wow. Okay.
it's very
Okay.
little. But what I will tell you is a huge trend in staffing is companies trying to move up the value chain and not just filling contract positions, but taking on statement of work jobs where they're responsible for deliverables. They can charge higher rates, but of course, it's riskier business, right? That the project, if you don't hit your deliverable, your people have to keep working and you're not getting more money.
Yeah.
So, but that's becoming a very common thing for staffing firms to do to try to become trusted partners and to move up the value chain.
Okay. I mean, I have a similar guarantee in my AI agency where I give a time frame when my clients should see results. And if they don't, then I work for free until those results that I promised actually
Mhm.
materialize. So I completely understand that. And a lot of businesses are going that way. And a lot of clients appreciate that because they don't want to keep paying if they're not seeing the results, right? So I guess it's a win-win for everyone. And that makes everybody, I think, work that much harder to make sure that what they've promised upfront is what they deliver, right? So it's holding everyone accountable. So that's good. We've sort of touched on this really briefly. And I think with the speed of development, especially in the tech space, I tend not to ask my clients long-term goals or where they see themselves in 3 years or 5 years, which is what we would have asked 10 years ago. So now I pretty much ask every guest, what's on the horizon for the next 6 to 12 months? Because everything's changing so quickly that I think, yes, we should have goals that are long-term goals, but I think in the space you're in, especially with AI moving so quickly, I'm just going to focus on the next 6 to 12 months. So what does Be Additive want to achieve in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so my business partner is running the staffing parts of our business, and we have different goals for each part of the business. But I can speak to Be Additive Tech, which is building the AI talent marketplace, because that's the part I'm running. So our goal is very clear for the next 6 to 12 months. We want to build a beachhead with funded AI startups who recognize that we are the best way of finding senior AI contractors globally. So when a company in Silicon Valley is open to hiring people from around the world as in senior roles, we're the place they go.
Fantastic. That's very clear, very concise, to the point. You're not you're not going to be missed. People know exactly what you're given when they come to you. You've already said that you use AI actively in the business, and so I'm going to say, if you had a magic wand, what would you want AI to do right now that it's probably not doing? So if money wasn't an object and you had this magic wand and you could wish for anything, what would be the one thing you would wish for?
All right. Uh, Believe it or not, I've been asked that question before.
Oh, okay.
And I've answered it in a kind of snarky way because I don't believe in magic wands. And and I never really liked when people wish for things. You have your reality that you're in and you move towards it. What I will say is you hear, you hear a lot about Darwinism, right? Survival of the fittest.
Mm,
Darwinism was never survival of the fittest. It was always survival of the most adaptable, right? The fittest were the dinosaurs. They were big and
exactly.
strong. They could eat,
They're
they could eat you.
extinct.
They were huge,
Mm,
but they weren't the most adaptable.
mm,
And with AI, with all the change coming, I think rather than wishing for things, you just need to be on top of it and you just need to be super adaptable. A lot of that is more than technology. So I talk to a lot of college students, people with computer science degrees who are freaking out because, for 30 years, you got a computer science degree from a good school and you were golden, right? Your
yes.
career was set. And now, some of them aren't getting any jobs. Maybe they're getting one. You
Mm,
know, 5 years ago, they got seven or eight. And and so they say, what I do? This is terrible. So this is the advice I give them. Um, First of all, we already talked about how good AI is at coding.
mm,
Coding's just another language. If all you know is how to code, you're not adaptable. You're very, very vulnerable. So advice number one is learn a second language.
mm,
Right? That could be the humanities. It could be how
mm,
to sell. It could
mm,
be becoming an expert in an industry.
mm,
But if you know how to code, but you're also an expert in an industry, you will have a lot of value to an employer where if all you can do is code, you won't. Um, the second thing is, and people with computer science degrees hate this advice, but you can't just show your credentials and think someone's going to hire you today. It just So you have to learn how to network. You have to develop people skills. And it's actually pretty easy to do. When you're young, people will take risk on you. They'll take chances. They'll want to mentor you. They will help you. If
mm,
you go to your professor and you say, these are my concerns with AI, I'm trying to learn a second language. Do you know people in this industry that will talk to me?
mm,
Um, I'm not going to ask them for a job. I just want to get smarter. Your professor will know people. These people will talk to you because you're 21 years old and they just want to help people who are 21. If you were 50, they would probably tell you to take a hike. But when you're 21, they will talk to you. And then you need to be prepared. And
mm,
that's where AI comes in. So don't just go meet the person, research everything. No, get on generative AI,
mm,
learn about the person, learn about their company, learn about their industry,
mm,
uh, give good prompts, ask it the right questions for you,
Mm,
and go in prepared, be a good listener, and then follow up. Uh, if they like you, they might offer you a job. They will almost certainly introduce you to other people. And if you drop them just shoot them an email every 2 months and just say, here's what I'm doing. And thank you
mm,
so much. They will help you for a long time. So
yeah,
learn a second language and network.
yeah. Okay. Um, so I think maybe my last two questions, and this is one that I didn't want to ask, but I think I should. Apart from, because we've touched on a few of the issues or challenges that could be in AI. So, for example, we spoke about security, unsavory characters using tech for, not so great endeavors. And then we said about impersonification in certain regions more than others, but I think it's happening on a global scale. It's just bigger pockets in different areas. What other challenges do you see with AI? Because I think, I was saying on Monday when I was giving you a background as to why I started doing this podcast calls, was that I found that there are the two extremes. If we look at that spectrum, where there's some CEOs and founders that are worried about the security, safety concerns, ethical use of AI on one end, and on the other end, the people who want to save a ton on payroll, and everybody else lies in between. And so I think the adoption rate for AI is increasing, but there's still some stuck in the mud CEOs, founders that they know they should be using it. They just don't have any idea where to start. So, from your perspective, what would you say are other challenges that we need to be aware of or we need to be discussing? And I think making people more comfortable with when considering AI adoption.
There you go. So that's a great question. And I don't think that's a question that is at all specific to staffing and recruiting. I think
No,
it applies
no,
to really
everything.
almost every industry.
Yeah.
Um, I First of all, from the company perspective,
Mm,
if you're overwhelmed, you got to get over it and just start. All right, just get your people using stuff. Do some demos, do some short trials. You just got to jump in and you'll start to learn what to use. Now, the problem that I think most companies have with AI today is they don't really understand it, and so
mm,
they have their existing work processes. They look for tools that can eliminate tasks or take people out of their existing work process.
mm,
And what they usually find is that the AI can work much faster than people and it produces much more output. And then the people need to follow up with everything and they have so much to follow up on that they don't get any efficiencies. And so once you start learning what it can do, you got to quickly move to re-engineer all your work processes so that they're AI first. So when it produces more output, you don't create a new bottleneck. And and I think we had that awareness when we started Be Additive. We had the advance. We're only 2 years old. All right. So um, you can do a lot of things and more intelligently if you see where it's going.
mm,
But you can't just adopt tools. You have to re-engineer your work processes to work with the tools. That's very different. I think a lot of the responsibility in AI really goes back to the foundation companies building foundation models, and they need to um, they need to be very careful. If they don't if they don't promote this in the right way, if it's perceived as killing jobs and creating security risks, there's going to be a lot of political backlash to it, and
mm,
it won't get adopted. So they have a big role in getting ahead of it and being responsible in how it's deployed, and which again, as a person, you got to be careful because they have a lot of incentive to paint these glowing pictures of trading mass, prosperity, and everyone works 10 hours a week and takes vacation and they make more money than they ever made. I don't think that's true. I also don't think the doomer scenario is true. Um, I also think that we need to be very, very careful about security. So we talked about Anthropic,
Mm,
Micro's preview earlier, but there's all these tools like OpenCloud coming out where you can build these AI agents. They're everywhere. Everyone's
mm,
playing with them,
mm,
and they are incredibly powerful, but they also scare the hell out of me because, you know, if they're not constrained, they can just start doing tasks.
yeah,
They can go into your computer and start erasing files and sending
yeah.
out emails. And so they're we've looked at that as part of our tools assessment team. We're not using agents right now because we're scared of the security concerns. And we'll bet any money we'll be using them in 9 months
Okay.
because they're getting, so you got to be on top of all of this stuff, but you just need to be very aware and thoughtful in what you're doing. So do experiments, jump in, learn about it. Uh, the companies who put their head in the sand are not going to survive,
Mhm.
right? It's survival of the most adaptable.
Fantastic. That's really good. Just give me 1 second. There's just somebody trying to send a message to me. Don't know why. Because I did say I was on a call. Uh, okay. Just sent them a message, so that should be fine. Okay. So I mean, I think that's great because you've just touched on. I mean, like I said, I had only two more questions, and but in that answer you just gave, the two things came up for me, especially when you said don't create another bottleneck just because you're introducing AI, because obviously the output that AI can produce is a lot more, and faster, better quality, whatever it is, and a lot of people that I've spoken to, and I think this is on the candidate side, are concerned about exactly that they're being required to do a lot more with a lot less, especially if they work for an employer who's letting go of a lot of people because they think they can save a ton on payroll. So the few people that are left in the business are having to do a lot more work just to
Mhm.
produce the same level of output. And a lot of these some of these organizations don't have well-crafted AI policies, and so their employees are using AI, shadow AI. So they're using it under the radar. They can't put their hands up and let their manager know that they're using AI to get some of their work done, just because there's such a lot of it to get done in a short space of time. And so when organizations and founders and CEOs tell me they've got security concerns, one of my questions I usually ask them is how well crafted their AI policies are,
Mm.
because I can tell them, I can almost promise them that at least 90% of their people are using AI, whether they know it or not, whether they want to know it or not, it's happening, right? They might be taking files home, doing something on their home computer, bringing it back into the workplace. That's happening, right? Are you having those kind of conversations with your clients? Do they have well-crafted AI policies? I mean, I know you're recruiting in a different space, so they're probably, you know, in there and doing, because I mean they're just so AI focused. But in the other parts of your business that you're, I guess you're not leading or overseeing, are those conversations being had with clients about AI policies and just how to safeguard the security and safety concerns and other people using AI without them knowing?
And I think there's very few companies that are not encouraging the use of AI. So you'd have to do it secretly. In fact, there's some like Meta, for example, all their engineers get rewarded for using tokens, right? Basically AI, the more they use AI, the more they get rewarded.
Oh, okay.
Um, I do think there's problems in companies that it's happening so fast. They don't know how to work it, to redesign their work processes to take advantage of it. So
Hmm.
you do get AI creating a lot of output, and then people need to deal with the output, and they don't really see productivity gains. I think companies are going to figure that out very rapidly over the next year, how to do that better. They're going to see those bottlenecks, and they're going to figure out that they need to just redesign their work processes. Um, but it's all, it's all going really fast. It's all changing really, really fast.
Yeah. I think that's one thing we can all agree on. It's moving. I mean, I have a community that I network with, and they have like a news team that just collect everything that's happening. So we get like a daily update on,
Mhm.
and I haven't checked in today, which is probably why I've missed the Anthropic update from yesterday, because there's just so much happening. There's no CEO, there's no founder that can keep on top of that, on a daily basis. There's so much happening. What I usually ask as a last question, because it's something that I offer as added value, just as being a guest on the call, is I tend to do something called a growth plan um, overview. So I do one other call before that call, just to see if I can add any value to, especially if they're staffing a recruitment company is just starting out. So be additive is only two. Um, and I always ask people if they're open to future calls where I can just touch base, maybe keep in touch, and we can speak in another 2 weeks or something like that, or maybe a month. Um, and so I just usually close out calls to say, are people open to staying connected? And so that's usually my final question as to, is that something that would be of value to be additive, for me to keep in touch and maybe have another call?
Yeah, of course. I look, I love knowing smart people. All right. So you're a smart person. So
I
I
don't
love
think
meeting
I'm
you.
smart. I'm learning from you.
But I will tell you that our the people in our company, they're the best people from my last company. We were pretty big, and they're all pretty immersed in AI. So with that caveat, well, I'd love to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much. That would be great, Hank. So I will keep in touch on email. It probably will not be next week, maybe the week after.
Hmm.
But I will keep in touch. If you share Nikki's, I think it was Nikki
Yeah,
Lobo, if you
yeah.
share her details with me, then we can talk about how we get this um, published so that a wider group of people can see this.
Hmm.
But like I promised, I will move this to Riverside and I will share the recording with you. And then we can pick it up from there as to how we get this published on YouTube and Spotify.
That sounds great. All right.
Yeah.
So let me shoot you an email as soon as we hang up. I'll
Okay.
introduce you to Nikki.
Fantastic.
She's
Oh,
she's terrific. She's like
thank you.
she's worked with me for 10 years. They're
Oh,
all
wow. Oh, I
yeah,
love this. I love
yeah.
this. Oh, thank you so, so much, Hank, for your time. And thank you for the intro to Nikki. And I look forward to keeping in touch. I mean, this has been a really valuable call for me. I've learned a lot. And yeah, you're definitely somebody I will keep in touch with. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Hank, for your time.
All right, Ivy. Thank you.
All righty.
Bye bye.
Okay, bye.